Morning Exchange. It's 27 degrees, mostly cloudy on the last day of the year, December 31st. Here we are.
That's right. Hard to believe.
New Year's resolutions in hand.
Yeah.
Good intentions.
Just a couple. They'll be the same next year.
Till tomorrow night.
That's right. We should tell you that Andre Whitfield is going to be with us this morning. He plays on All My Children. He plays Terrence Fry.
That's right. We'll also talk with Dr. Stephen Soroka this hour. He is an AIDS education expert, and we're going to talk about the issue of whether or not condoms should be available to students in schools.
And we'll also talk about the film JFK, highly controversial movie, and David Moss is going to join us for that this morning. David, good morning. Thank you very much.
Good morning, sir.
I went to see the film last night so I would know of what we were speaking today.
That's a good thing, isn't it?
Right.
There are so many people being very critical of the picture.
This is the actual Zapruder film, which we didn't see for such a long time. And these are scenes from the film using the Zapruder film as the basis. And that was, of course, in the afternoon of the 22nd of November, 1963. And it's one of those moments that I will never forget the rest of my life. You vaguely have a recollection, perhaps.
Actually, I remember very well because I was in third grade.
Third grade.
In Mrs. Tanner's class.
And she came and told everybody?
She came in and she was in tears. And, of course, the students are, oh, my gosh, you know, the teacher's crying, what's wrong? And she told us the president had been shot.
I was a freshman in high school in Mr. Maury's civic class, and came with a loudspeaker, and it was one of those moments that devastated everyone no matter where you went.
Yeah.
It was a terrible situation.
I was working in the radio here in town, and I was sick, and I worked the morning news, and I was on Howie Lund. Howie Lund did the morning music, and I did the news. I was sick, and I went home, and I turned on just the radio was just on, or the TV or something. I was lying there with my affliction, and all of a sudden this started to develop, and I leapt up and went back to the radio station and just hung around there the rest of the day.
Here's something we've talked about for 28 years and some months.
Yeah.
And of course, in the beginning, everyone said that it was all done by one man, Lee Harvey Oswald, and it was in fact not a conspiracy. And there was one man in New Orleans who didn't believe that, a man named Jim Garrison. And I think the reason that happened was Lee Harvey Oswald had a connection to New Orleans along with a bunch of other. And in this clip, Jim Garrison is sitting around with his fellow prosecutors, and they're trying to sort out the facts, and he's trying to tell them his theory as to what happened. So this is the clip from JFK, Oliver Stone's picture.
I'm lost, boss. What are we saying here?
We're saying that when Oswald went to Russia, he was not a real defector. That he was an intelligence agent on some kind of mission for our government and remained one till the day he died. That's what we're saying.
Therefore, because Oswald pulled the trigger, the intelligence community murdered their own commander-in-chief? Is that what you're saying?
I'll go you one better, Bill. Maybe Oswald didn't even pull the trigger. Nitrate tests indicate he hadn't even fired a rifle on November 22nd. And on top of that, they didn't even bother to see if the rifle had been fired that day.
He had his palm print on the weapon.
Well, it went to the FBI, Bill. FBI didn't find a damn thing. It comes back a week later, and one guy in the Dallas Police Department suddenly finds a palm print. For all we know, it could have been taken off Oswald in the morgue. There's no chain of evidence.
I never could figure out why this guy orders a traceable weapon to this post office box when he can go into any store in Texas, give a phony name, and walk out with a rifle which can never be traced.
To frame him, obviously.
There's a lot of smoke there, but there's some fire.
We're talking about our government here.
No, we're talking about a crime, Bill, pure and simple.
Brings up a lot of little thoughts that perhaps people have put away or forgotten. 28 years is a long time, and Oliver Stone is digging this all up. And of course, Jim Garrison was regarded as a nut. I mean, by the end of this story, as he brought people to trial and such, Clay Shaw, they thought he was a crazy guy. So here you have Kevin Costner, who's a highly respected actor, and you say, hey, you're going to go play this crazy guy? You're going to get on Oliver Stone's train and say, hey, there is a giant conspiracy here? So I had to ask Kevin. I said, hey, did you believe this? I mean, what did you think? And this was his reply.
And how much did you know about it, really? You only know what you're told, you know, and if the system was working perfectly, that would work. But, you know, it's difficult to measure motives behind what people write. It's difficult to measure agendas behind what people were telling us and the reasons. And so, you know, people that were living at that time only know what they were told, too. You know, there's basically one big side of the story came out, which was we know who it is, we have who it is, and it's better to get on with our lives. And as time has worn on, that story has worn thin for a lot of people, and people that do think they know a lot about it, and there certainly are some, But you know, a lot of us are just in the mode of having catchphrases, knowing who Oswald is and Jack Ruby and Warren Commission, and these words can swirl by you, and you have the feeling that you understood what happened on November 22nd, 1963. But this movie, you know, kind of sheds light on a lot of different other ideas that could have happened and things that were truly going on at the time.
It's pretty obvious that Oliver Stone has converted Kevin Costner to believe that the Warren Commission was a hill of beans.
Now, this guy, Jim Garrison, was not portrayed as what people perceived him to be in real life in the film, was
No,
he?
and that is one of the great conflicts with the film. One of the controversies of the picture is, in fact, that Oliver Stone used Jim Garrison to collect many facts that Garrison, in fact, did not collect and deliver them in the story as though he did. So,
Exactly.
So a lot of folks are rather disrupted by that.
It's a fiction in many ways.
It is.
Also, it's very ironic that he chose Jim Garrison, who's now a judge in his 70s, to play Earl Warren, who was the head of the Warren Commission, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court.
There's a lot of crazy things like that. Asner, as a matter of fact, playing a man way to the right when he was really way to the left.
Yeah.
And Ed Asner is terrific. Everyone is terrific in the film. Now, you know, we're talking about Kevin Costner here being converted by Oliver Stone. Where did Oliver Stone get these big, strong feelings that the Warren Commission was off base? This was one of his reactions.
When Lyndon Johnson put Allen Dulles on the board, this was a joke. Allen Dulles had been fired by Jack Kennedy as the head of the CIA. And his worst enemy, one of his worst enemies, was put on the Warren Commission to investigate his death. And then Dulles, of course, in that position, prevented any intelligence information from the FBI or the CIA to get through to the Warren Commission. He controlled it. That's like the fox investigating the chicken coop. Something was screwy there. I mean, American people would not have stood for it today because we've been, you see, the disease that killed Kennedy, the symptoms are still with us. I mean, that covert operations mentality, that secret government that I describe in the movie, obviously went to work right after Kennedy, and I think it worked its way through Vietnam, where we killed so many Asians, and Operation Phoenix comes to mind, and then we moved on into destabilizations of various countries. We moved into Watergate, we moved into Iran Gate, Martin Luther King, Robert Kennedy were killed. I mean, the disease was manifested itself numerous times, and will again.
Does he think Lee Harvey Oswald was just the fall guy in this?
Well, we have a clip that gives his direct reaction to that. But first what we're going to do is we're going to ask Gary Oldman, who studied the character, whether or not he believes Oswald did it. And it's a very interesting reaction.
I'm just a patsy. Yeah. He was, I believe, anyway, he was innocent. He didn't shoot anybody. He said, you know, he said for a whole weekend, I didn't kill anyone. I didn't do anything. I didn't shoot anyone. I don't know, it would seem strange that a madman, as he was, you know, and someone who was that, supposedly that political, and a communist to boot, would go and, would not take the opportunity of saying to the world, this is why I did this.
So there's a pretty good point for you.
Yeah.
So it brings us right to the question, asking Oliver Stone. Okay, Oliver, you know it all. Tell me, who did it?
David, I could be more specific. I think I pulled back on the movie a little bit because I didn't want to, I don't know, I didn't want to bully people into accepting just my conclusions. I wanted to lay out the forces. I want people to think for themselves. Maybe when the film is out there a little bit, and the debate is more public, it would be the right time for me to come forward with some of my own theories as to exactly who, but they're only theories.
So I have to think, I wonder, have you become like Jim Garrison? I mean, have you become like crazy with this thing, trying to figure it out and put it together?
I feel as vilified as Jim Garrison by some of the major media, yes. Yeah. When Dan Rather attacks me without having seen the movie, or Tom Wicker in the New York Times, or you know, the Washington Post, it's outrageous, and it makes me feel that there's an agenda. It makes you crazy too, but I'm trying to keep, you know, Garrison was a great fighter. He never gave up. He lost the case, but so did Clarence Darrow. He lost the Scopes trial. But Garrison never gave up. He wrote another book when he was an old man about the case. To the day, he's in bad shape, but I'm glad he's seen the film and he feels vindicated.
That doggone Dan Rather.
That's it, being attacked by Dan. His career's over.
New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Time Magazine, Newsweek, Washington Post. They all were pretty rough on it.
The movie wasn't even made and they were rough on it.
I saw Cokie Roberts, whose father was on the Warren Commission, Hale Boggs, the congressman. She said, I'm not even going to see it. Well, let's take a break. And when we come back, Judge Burt W. Griffin of the Court of Common Pleas here in Cuyahoga County, he was with the Warren Commission, and he saw all of these facts, and he will join us up here and give us his thoughts on this film. We'll be right back.
They drive drunk over and over again.
My last DWI was Saturday. I just got out of jail yesterday.
I promise you, Patrick, you will eventually kill or maim someone.
I drank while I was in the jail, and I drank when I got out.
My son was killed. A 14-year-old little girl was killed. It's got to stop. It has to stop.
Habitual drunk drivers tell why they do it on the next Oprah.
Tuesday afternoon at 4 on TV5.
If your basement leaks every time it rains, you can stop it with one phone call to the number below. SPU will send a foundation expert to your home free of charge to pinpoint your problem and provide a detailed estimate on how to solve it. All work carries up to a 35-year conditional guarantee. So you can do one of two things: pray it never rains again, or call SPU. Now, 467-7100.
Barris Optical is the talk of the town. And here's what people are saying.
Our whole family goes to Barris Optical because we save a lot of money.
I've shopped at several chain stores prior to me going to Barris, and have found Barris to be a bigger savings over any of the other stores.
Barris Optical has a great selection of men's frames.
And ladies' frames. And kids' frames, too.
Barris Optical, where you'll save 40% on frames and lenses every day. 6 convenient locations to serve you, now open at Shakertown Center.
He says we can't get married for 3 years or more, 'cause we're only in our teens. Oh no, we're not too young to get married, not too young
Don't miss the fabulous Laura Salkin Bridal Show Sunday, January 5th at the Embassy Suite in Beechwood, or Sunday, January 12th at the West 150th Street Marriott. Call 777-8600 for reservations.
This is the future home of New Life Community. Through your support, their work to help the homeless can continue. Send in a donation and help someone find a home for the holidays.
David also spoke with Oliver Stone about the very matter we were discussing just before the break, the media attack on him. Major media in this country attacking the film, and some of them attacking it before they had even seen it. And here's what Oliver Stone, the producer and director of the film, had to say about that.
And why? I have to wonder why. What harm could my film possibly do? Even if it's full of beans and makes no sense, so what? People will walk away, they'll look at it, and they won't believe it. I mean, the people will decide, ultimately. They always do. Why don't they trust in democracy, that their vaunted democracy? Why don't they just let free speech exercise itself? They tried to pre-censor the movie, and it makes me wonder about their own motivation. Is there fear? Are they trying to defend the Warren Commission because they have a stake in it?
Yeah, why? What would that stake be?
Journalists that are older men that, you know, help formulate the idea that the Warren Commission was accurate and tried to sell it to the American people for 28 years, brainwashing them with the Oswald did it alone mantra. But the American people never bought it. They never were brainwashed.
It perpetuates the whole conspiracy thing, doesn't it? I mean, it's almost like there's somebody out there championing, protecting whatever's buried.
Yeah, never before has a movie been, as I know, as far as I know, movie been attacked before it was finished like this.
Judge Burt W. Griffin joins us this morning. He was there. He worked on this whole process. Burt, good morning.
Good morning,
Thank you very
Fred.
much for coming this morning.
Thank you.
Let's go into what the Warren Commission was, first of all. A lot of people don't even know. Tell us what it was, how it came to be, what you did with it.
Well, President Johnson asked Chief Justice Earl Warren to be the chairman of the commission, which had 7 members, including the Chief Justice. And as you pointed out, it was Hale Boggs, who was then the minority leader, I believe, in the House. We had John Sherman Cooper, who was a Republican senator from Kentucky, Alan Dulles, John McCloy, who had formerly been the High Commissioner to Germany, Senator Richard Russell, who was one of the most prominent members of the Senate, and former President Gerald Ford.
And so here these guys are, and you're working with them. And what was your role with the commission?
Well, I was responsible for investigating the role that Jack Ruby had to play in all of these events. We had about a dozen staff members at the beginning. There were 2 assigned to each of 6 areas of investigation. Another man and I were involved in the Ruby investigation. And Arlen Specter, who is, as you know, now a senator from Pennsylvania, was a member of the staff, and he's the one who devised the single bullet theory.
In a number of interviews that we have seen with Oliver Stone, he talks about the files that the public should be able to see, and they should finally be opened. What would be in those files?
Well, you know, I'm very surprised, and I don't, frankly, understand what's being done with those files. When I left the commission staff, it was my understanding that everything that we had seen would be made available to the public, with one exception, and those were the autopsy photographs, which understandably the Kennedy family had specifically requested not be made available because of the devastating effect it could have on their children and the emotional impact it could have on other members of the family. I'm told now that there are materials which are not being made available. I frankly can't see any reason to withhold anything at this point, other than the limited access to the autopsy photographs. I still think that there's a privacy concern there with the Kennedy family that ought to be respected.
You saw the film. We all saw it. And as we saw it unfold, it seemed like almost everybody was being painted with this conspiracy brush, even at the autopsy. I mean, here are naval admirals there who are medical corps people, top people in the medical establishment saying, don't make this cut. Do we know that they said it? Do we know that they said don't do this process or that procedure?
Oh, no, of course we don't know that. And when you think about this, if you take the conspiracy theory that's set forth in this movie, there had to be 100 people involved in this conspiracy.
At least, maybe more.
Yes, and how do you do that? How do you put a conspiracy like that together?
What's interesting, though, is that there are no recorded moments of the autopsy, of the interrogation of Lee Harvey Oswald. Did, in fact, the intelligence community stifle that information that was available to you?
Well, you know, they don't record, they don't videotape, audio tape autopsies. We don't do that today. People were trying to save the president's life, not make a photographic record. Somewhere, you know, even today in our police department here in Cleveland, they don't do either video or audio tapes of interrogating suspects.
They do have to keep a record now and have
but notes are maintained, and to my knowledge, all of the reports that were prepared have been retained.
Was everything consistent, though, between the autopsy and the coroner's report? And was there any discrepancy about entrance and exit wounds from one report to another?
The doctors at Parkland Hospital originally believed that the wound in the front of the president's neck was an entrance wound because of its clean-cut nature. They had really not looked at the wound in the back of the president's neck. You understand that they were working to save his life. They had him on his back. So they assumed that this was the entrance wound, and this wound back here, whatever it was an exit wound. Of course, when the autopsy physicians had a chance to look at this, they saw that the wound in the back of the neck was a very clean-cut wound, and they did not have available to themselves the wound in the front of the neck, because that had been obliterated by the tracheotomy that was performed. So you had 2 sets of doctors who didn't each have the same information to look at, and the commission put them together and asked them to explain this discrepancy, and they came to a common conclusion that this was an entrance wound. The doctors at Parkland Hospital agreed ultimately when they saw that wound that it was an entrance wound, and they all concluded that what they had seen here was an exit wound. Now, why was that? Because if you had 2 holes here, an entrance wound here and an entrance wound here, you either had to have some other exit wounds, or you had to have 2 bullets in the president's body. There were no bullets in the president's body.
You know, talk about trying to save his life, too. We've seen the films. Well, we've seen pictures of this before, but in this movie, you actually see a picture of the president from the autopsy, and you can see that there was no way they were going to save that man's life. I mean, the damage to the back of his head was so extraordinary.
Well, you know, they didn't give up.
Yeah.
They hoped to do it. They had a professional and I think emotional obligation that they were working under.
And it just, the adrenaline flows and you just do whatever you can.
Absolutely, absolutely.
What were your impressions of the film?
I thought as a film, it's really an excellent film, with one exception, and Fred and I were talking about this earlier. You didn't need that 15 minutes at the end or whatever it was.
I agree.
In the monologue. I mean, I'm amazed that even Oliver Stone, who's such a tremendous producer and
got
director.
a little syrupy, didn't he?
Why would he have done that?
What was that for those of us who...
The closing argument of Garrison to the jury, which went on and on and on.
In the Shaw trial.
Yeah, it was, I mean, that should have been cut to, what?
2 minutes.
2 minutes, right. And it seemed like it went on forever.
I didn't need the tear in the eye either.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
His voice choked up and he cried.
But otherwise, it was, you know, it's an excellent movie. I've got an article that's coming out, which I think will be published in the Plain Dealer, if I can hold, be published in the Plain Dealer and hopefully elsewhere. I think there's a better movie that could be made that would be based on the truth. And that would be that there's an ironic backfire here. That, as we all know, President Kennedy was involved in an effort to assassinate Fidel Castro. We didn't know that at the time of the investigation. The evidence is very strong that Oswald saw himself now as the avenger for that Oswald had awareness of the rumors that were circulating in the Cuban community that this assassination effort was underway. So that Oswald was really setting himself up to avenge President Kennedy's effort to assassinate Castro. I think that would make a great movie. And I think if you took the facts...
Would it be any more true than Oliver Stone's?
I think it would be true. I think there's...
I wonder how many different theories there are right now.
Well, there are a lot of theories, but let me say, I think there's a lot of evidence to support what I've just said. I think the American people doesn't want to believe this because, you know, this would do something to the hero image of a very great president. I also think that if you're fair with the evidence is overwhelming that Oswald was the gunman.
Judge, we heard Oliver Stone say, what harm could my movie do? Do you believe it has the potential for inflicting harm?
Well, it's certainly harm if you think that using inaccurate information to discredit the government and create lack of confidence in the government is a harm. I happen to think it is. I see nothing wrong with discrediting the government if it deserves to be discredited. But to use information improperly and inaccurately to do it, I think that's a harm.
I suppose it could be argued that the lines between entertainment and reality are so often blurred today that for a whole generation of people who know very little about the assassination and the Warren Commission, perhaps they would accept Oliver Stone's version of events as historical fact.
I think that's right.
That's the danger, I think.
Yeah, I think that's right. And, you know, this is something that we ourselves struggled with when we were working on the commission staff. And we knew we were creating an historic document. We weren't just investigating a crime.
You know they'd be looking at it forever.
We knew, that's right. I used to kid people. I said, you know, when I'm 85 years old, somebody's going to ask me to come on the morning exchange. And what was it like, you know?
You're 85, too.
Well, you know, David, we talked about this the other day. One of the problems is you were talking about it's hard to tell what the real newsreel, how you can differentiate the real newsreel from the newsreel he created to make it look like newsreel.
He mixed medium so excellently.
And Amelia, who went to see it last night, our producer, she said as she came out, she heard 2 young people walking out. They looked like the late teens, and one of them said to the other, well, now we know who did it. And the other one said, no, we don't know who did it, but we know why they did it. And so these young people who were not alive when this event took place 28 years ago are getting their first impression of that awful day from this film, which a lot of people say is not true, not truthful.
Right.
I find it strange, though, that Time magazine or huge New York or Chicago papers would come, would attack Oliver Stone when, in fact, they are the ones that should champion free speech. I mean, certainly there are some negative sides to this, being able to speak your mind, but at the same time...
But isn't attacking him also part of free speech?
Sure, certainly.
I think it's all fair game.
Yeah.
Another thing I have to mention about the movie, I couldn't believe how many people were smoking. The judge on the bench was smoking. It was just smoke everywhere.
But I've never seen that. Maybe that happened in New Orleans in those days, but I can't imagine it happening in America today.
David, did you ever see the Nova piece, which sought to pull together all of the aspects of this case and without saying we're trying to prove that the Warren Commission is correct, but just tried to say that this is still consistent. All of the facts are consistent with the single gunman in the depository scenario. You've seen that film.
Yeah, yeah.
And even the question of the crazy bullet, the maverick bullet, as he described it in the film, which had to make 8 turns.
Right, which is
absurd.
Yeah, if I can pardon the metaphor, but it's a complete distortion of the truth. There's a very strong case for the single bullet theory if one has the patience to put together all of the evidence. And you know, there's so much evidence that has to be pieced together that it's easy to get lazy and want to leave out some crucial part of it which destroys the assault on the opposite theory.
Isn't it interesting, though, that here 28 years after the fact, we are still totally mesmerized by this issue and the questions that still remain? Do you think that these questions will ever be put to rest, or until everybody who perhaps was living at the time will is gone, will these finally
I don't think the questions will ever be put to rest.
I think a lot of it stems back to, in this particular case, this particular film, Oliver Stone's hate for his time that he spent in Vietnam. I mean, you saw Platoon, you saw Born on the 4th of July, and now this is like getting back to like, well, I should have never been there anyway. So I mean, I think he certainly puts a little emotion into this and personalizes the facts.
It seems to me that if the traumatic event in Oliver Stone's life had been being reared by a psychotic mother, as Jack Ruby was, having been rejected by a totally rejecting mother who put him in an orphanage when he was 3 years old, which Lee Oswald was, you might have taken a very different kind of tack on this movie.
He would have made different kind of movies, too.
Yeah.
He'd had a whole different
It would have been a sociological, psychological perspective rather than a political perspective.
Well, it looks like the Mafia and the Dallas Police and the military-industrial complex and Lyndon Baines Johnson and the CIA and all of those Cubans were all involved in a giant conspiracy, and as you say, there had to be hundreds of people.
It was a tremendous organizing effort, wasn't it?
And something would have had to have come out by now, you would think. But at any rate, is there any harm in going to see this film if you know what you're going to see?
Oh, I think people will enjoy it. You know, it's the event of the year, and I think you ought to see it.
It's a great filmmaking.
Right, it certainly is.
Oliver would be
I'm going to see it again.
You believe there's no truth, though, to his contentions?
There's no truth to his 2 basic contentions. One is that Oswald was a patsy. That's totally false. The evidence is overwhelming that Oswald was the gunman. And secondly, that this was a conspiracy of 100 people from Lyndon Johnson on down. There's no truth to that.
Well, thank you for coming this morning.
Thanks,
nice
Fred.
to have you here.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Judge Burt Griffin worked on that report, which, as he says, will be read in perpetuity, probably.
That's right. Not the report. The movies will be seen in perpetuity.
The books will be written.
The report will be put aside.
Thanks, David.
Thanks. David, that was great. Thank you very much. And he had the chance to talk to all these heavy hitters.
I heard a lot of different opinions. There's no doubt about that.
Judge Burt Griffin, thanks a lot.
Thanks, Fred.
We'll take a bit of a break. When we come back, Andre Whitfield is here. He plays Terrence on All My Children, and he'll join us right after this.
Tonight's the night for parties and celebrations, and for a 20-year-old tradition, Dick Clark's New Year's Rockin' Eve. I'm Lou Maglio. Once again, the world's oldest teenager is ringing in the new year live from Times Square. But before the ball drops, Dick Clark will join us live with a preview today on Live on 5.
How can you stop a throbbing toothache? Massage your hand with ice. How do you cure poison ivy? Try oatmeal. How do you quiet a colicky baby? Run the vacuum. How do I know these cures really work? Because my staff and I spent months interviewing over 500 doctors and health professionals.